Welcome to Make Your Show the Creators. I'm John Kramer.
And I'm Jason Chichi.
We help anyone who wants to make a show realize their vision every step of the way, from concept, creation, production, post-production.
In this podcast, we talk with creators who have done this themselves. We want these stories to inspire and educate anyone out there who is thinking of taking a shot at storytelling.
Today, our guest is Keith Powell. He's an actor, a writer, a director, a filmmaker, but you probably know him as Toofer from 30 Rock, which was actually kind of a problem.
We chat with Keith about how he created his award-winning web series, Keith Broke His Leg, in order to make sure he wouldn't be pigeonholed, how he pulled it off, what he gained from the experience, and what he'd do differently next time.
So, as Jason mentioned in the email that he sent, we're interested, the people that we're talking to are people, primarily actors, who want to make their own work. And they're like, how do you do that? And you obviously have done that and had success at doing it. So even though you're doing so much stuff besides Keith Broke His Leg, we wanted to focus on that and talk about why you made Keith Broke His Leg, how you pulled it off. So can you just start out by telling us a little bit about where were you in your acting career when you decided to make your show?
So the whole show kind of came about after I had left 30 Rock and I had just moved to Los Angeles with my girlfriend who became my wife. And so I was newly married and I was in a new home and I was on a new coast and there was a period of time in that transition of 30 Rock ending and right before I made this web series where I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted my voice to be. Mm-hmm. And because my voice was changing, because I was changing, I didn't quite know what it was, but I knew that my style was different than 30 Rock, and I didn't want to get pigeonholed into it. So I was actually blessed to be in a good place in my acting career. I just wanted to define myself before other people defined me.
Yeah.
And so I was well known, in terms of I was getting work, I was well known. But I was well known as Toofer on 30 Rock and not as Keith Powell, the artist.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how the genesis of Keith Broke His Leg began.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, just right off the bat, you talk about a thing that I feel like when we've talked to other people who have made their own work, they ultimately get to that realization by the end. I think a lot of actors are motivated to make their own work because they see it as a way, they see it as a tool, mm-hmm. right? Mostly. An outcome being, hopefully, I think that they'll have more and better acting work. This is a kind of a different angle that you're starting from, which is you're already doing well. It's funny when you talk to other actors about man, you've really made it. You're on 30 Rock, and you're thinking, there's all these other things I want to do. But to kind of take control, even at a different stage of your career.
That's really what it was for me. I didn't want to be defined by other people. I didn't want other people to define me. I wanted to define myself. And I really felt like that was the road I was headed down, where I was only going to get cast in certain things and only do certain parts. And I always wanted to be a full artist. I didn't want to be an actor. I didn't go to school for acting. I went to school for acting. I went to NYU, but I got my degree as a director.
Okay.
And as a theater director, and thankfully I was getting acting work while I was still in school, but I wanted to be a full artist, and being pigeonholed after 30 Rock was not allowing me to do that.
Yeah,
and
not
so
part of the plan.
and so so my goal for myself was that I only allowed myself two rewrites. No, one rewrite. So two drafts.
Uh-huh.
So I wrote all of Keith Broke His Leg, and I because I wanted it to just be my id coming out on paper,
Yeah.
and make each episode a very specific, crafted. I wanted each episode to be about something, and even if it wasn't funny, even if it explored the mundane, you know,
Yeah.
I wanted every episode to be about something.
Did you think of them as like vignettes, like they could stand alone, or did you want them to have an overall arc with characters that you brought in occasionally?
It was not so much an overall arc with characters, but I mean, that's not to say that there wasn't something in my mind going, this is about one person exploring, relearning who he is after an injury. And I believe that by the 10th episode, he gets to a place that is different than he was in the first episode. But I was thinking about it more in terms of the little moments and little stories that I wanted to tell each. I think I was like on a Mad Men kick during writing Keith Broke His Leg, and so Mad Men to me was so much about the overall journey of Don Draper, but it was also, each episode was about something, and I wanted that to kind of go through my work, and I actually shared the script with, ironically enough, I shared the script with Matt Weiner, who created Mad Men, because because 30 Rock and Mad Men were kind of sister shows in a way, to kind of get his guidance on how to kind of do that, and he very much encouraged me to not worry about if the show is funny or not.
Yeah, that's great.
And so I did that. I did the first draft, and then I did a rewrite.
So when you say you did a first draft, can I just ask for some clarification? Is that a first draft of the whole season?
The first draft of the first 6 episodes.
Okay.
And then I did another 6 episodes, but I only released 4, and then I released 2 as bonus episodes because it didn't fit.
Yeah.
So I wrote it in 2 6-episode chunks.
Okay.
And you had written before, right, Keith? This wasn't your first time writing, was it?
Correct. No, it was not my first time writing. I had been hired. I've been hired to write things. I was a professional writer. I was in the WGA. And it was a part of my talent that no one ever really knew about or saw. And being a director was not something that anybody knew about or saw. And so that's why I wanted to do this. But when I had the 6 episodes, then I went, well, what the hell am I going to do with them? And so it began the journey of, I met with a DP and I talked to him about what I wanted to do with it and how I wanted to make it and why I wanted to make it and what I felt like the arc of the story was and what I felt like it looked like. And I wanted to do, at the time, web series were just starting to become an acceptable format, right? And so a lot of the times, and this actually speaks, John, to what you were saying, is that during that time, there were people who were making web series as showcases for themselves as actors. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to tell specific stories. And so I wanted it to feel like a cable show. I wanted it to feel like you were watching not a showcase of look at me, look at how I could act, but watching very specific little stories.
Yeah. So, I mean, you obviously came to this experience with some things that a lot of other actors don't when they come to, making their series. Experience writing, experience directing, which we haven't gotten to yet, you know, being on set, um, and a place in your career where you feel like you've had some success and you want to make a statement about what kind of work you want to do and tell specific stories. You're not making a
Right.
calling card for yourself as an actor.
Right. I didn't, and actually I specifically did not want it to be a calling card. I wanted it to be an exploration of me as an artist. So, I mean, I guess you can call that a calling card, but yeah, I didn't see it as making sure that the world saw my web series. Now, as we get into this conversation, you'll know that one of my biggest regrets is not focusing from the very beginning on distribution. But at the time, this was an artistic statement.
Sure. Okay, so you've got this idea, you've got a very clear intention. How you mentioned interviewing a DP. How do you assemble a team of collaborators? Who's helping you make this show? How do you connect with them?
Beg, borrow, and steal.
Yeah.
I didn't do crowdfunding on this show. I financed it all myself, and so I said to everybody who worked on the project, I said, the budget is $0. Let's see how far we go over. And so what, and I used to teach a class on how to create a web series, and a lot of the things that I've done was treating your collaborators as fellow artists and not as employees or people who are there to execute your vision. And when you are able to include everybody in the process, along with the art of it, they're more willing to to donate their time. I had a long conversation with the DP who did want to get paid. So we figured out, what amount of money that he could feel comfortable with in terms of taking off from work and doing it. And we said, okay, what's the minimum amount of crew that we can have? And I'm going to tell you, it was a lot of the times, I mean, we did have, it depended on the day, but we did have more than 2 people. But a lot of the time, it was the DP who was the cameraman and focus puller. He was his own focus puller. That's why we had to do a lot of takes, because he not always got the focus right.
Yeah.
And the sound guy. And it was just the 3 of us running up, Laurel Canyon and shooting a really quick bit, and trying to make it work. So it was just the 3 of us a lot of the times. And then of course, later on, we got some help, like we had some PAs, and then we had a focus puller one day, and like then we kind of built out from that. But for the most part, the core team was just the 3 of us, because that's all I could afford.
Sure. Tell us about cast. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jason.
I was just saying we can relate.
Yeah.
So
And I think a lot of people can. Tell us about casting. We obviously know a little bit about some of the actors you involved, but tell us the story. How'd you get
my friends?
Yeah.
When I wrote the scripts, I wrote it with people in mind. I wrote it with people in mind, and I was making fun of them.
Yeah.
There's an episode called Soup that I did, that
the couple.
Yeah, and that couple is a real couple. That's Alex Weed and Fiona Gubelman. And Fiona or Alex is a vegan. I don't remember which one. One of them is a vegetarian, one of them is a vegan. And I had to make dinner for them one night, and I was just like, I don't know what to do with you vegans. And so I wrote a whole script about bleeding into a vegan dish. I mean, I don't know where it came from, but it just
It's hilarious.
And Alex and Fiona had just bought a house at the same time we bought a house. And so I was like, wouldn't it be great if we just did this weird Martha Stewart dick measuring contest about our house?
Yeah.
And that's, so it was, a lot of it was in the writing was just me making fun of my friends.
Yeah.
Where did your leg being broken come into all of this?
That is completely fictional. That is the only thing that is completely fictional. I created the idea of breaking my leg because I didn't want to have to leave my house, and B, in a super arty farty way, I felt like, and I said something in passing to my wife when we moved to LA and I was getting married and I had bought this house, where it's like all of my bones are broken and I'm re-healing into a new person, right? And so that's kind of like, I said that in passing, it was like in the healing process, my bones are becoming a new thing. And so when I was kind of putting the show together, I was like, well, this is about a person who has broken his bones and is rehealing. I thought it was fun that you never know how he broke his leg. I thought that was funny.
And was it a conscious decision budget-wise too? Because if he doesn't leave his house very much, then you don't have to concern yourself with so many locations.
It was that kind of conscious decision. I didn't let that obviously hinder me, because the show has a lot of locations actually, but
right.
The main locations are the house. And also it was one of those things where I wanted to include my wife in it, and I wanted to shoot in the house. My wife at the time was a former actress. My wife is a visual artist, and she got her degree from grad school in acting, but she had stopped acting, and I needed a way to slyly get her back in. So if I had said to her that we're shooting in the house, but you got to say some of these lines, then it would make her more easier to see a film crew in her house. And and that was really that's what happened. So like we would wake up in the morning and I'd say, Will, who was our DP, and Richard, who was our sound guy, Will and Richard are coming over. Can you just say some of these lines? And she'd be like, oh, what do I have to fucking memorize? and then she won an award for it. So I mean,
we were there that year. We were there at
you were
that she won the award, I believe.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
I was so proud of her. So this is what happened. We had released all the episodes, and we won the Indie Series Awards for best comedy, and then but Jill didn't win, and I was like, I think that Jill really needs to win.
Yeah.
So that's why I released the 2 unreleased episodes to qualify for that next year.
Right.
Yeah.
So that next year when you guys were at that show was really kind of like a victory lap.
That's so great.
Yeah, that's great. Can you tell us a little bit more about, so we've got, kind of the story so far chronologically, about the actual production process. It sounds like it was obviously a very bare bones crew. You had your friends as the cast and your wife. What about locations? You mentioned you had a lot of locations. How did you go about getting all these locations? Was it also favors?
Yes, I mean, it was driving past places that I knew in the neighborhood and asking them, you know, I'm also a very quick shooter. So I knew that time spent in the location would be a major factor. So I devised a complete plan and gave it to these people who I didn't know. Like to some of the, you know, some places we shot in, I knew the person. But the places that I didn't know, like for instance, we did an episode. There was an episode called Soothsayer, where we did an episode in a psychic store. I called them and said, "Here's my plan. We're going to be in and out. We're going to be in and out in 2 hours. So can I do it for, I don't know how much I said at the time, $150 an hour."
Yeah.
And because they saw the plan and they were convinced that I would be fast, they allowed me to shoot in there.
That's
and
amazing.
we did it. We got it in out in 2 hours. So it was presenting a plan to people and you know, trying to reduce the amount of money that it would cost in that location. Sometimes we stole shots. There was, you know, an episode called Engage where we shot on an overlook at the Universal Overlook.
That was beautiful.
Stole it. There was some scenes where I shot inside a theater, so I just rented a theater for an hour. You know, just like little things like that. It just going on Share Space, I think it's called, or Share Space.
I think that's right.
Really gives you some inspiration on locations.
Yeah.
And prices.
Yeah. What kind of experience had you had before making Keith Broke His Leg in terms of production? And I guess I skipped a step, you know, pre-production. What kind of experience did you had with this kind of planning before?
Well, I was trying to transition into TV directing, and thank God, knock on wood, I've now transitioned into it. So I had shadowed on a number of television shows and started understanding how TV works and how to shoot quickly and how to have a plan and how to make something look good, but also done cheaply. So, and the major lesson that I learned in all of that is pre-production is king. Prep is king. We spent about 3 times the amount of shoot on pre-production. So if shooting took, I think shooting, we did an episode a day. So if shooting took, you know, 6 days, and they were like spread out over weekends, then I probably took a month and a half in pre-production. And that was a month and a half of diligent planning because we had no money. So I made all the call sheets. You know, made sure that we had enough insurance for X, Y, and Z. I did all the planning in that regard because we had no money. I had to do it all, and made sure that whatever artists I collaborated with had enough time where I could collaborate with them and make them feel comfortable about what the shooting plan was. Prep is your friend.
Sure.
And I wrote an article about making Keith Broke His Leg, and I had said, time is the currency of a broke filmmaker.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, like if you think that you need X amount of time, triple it.
I'm just going to put this out there. That piece that you wrote was for IndieWire.
IndieWire.
And we can have a link to that in our show notes after we're done, because that was a helpful article, I think, for people who want to make their own show. What, in terms of your planning, was there anything that you needed to learn or do that you didn't already know how to do from your shadowing experience? And how did you learn how to do it?
I guess I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so I kind of just jumped in at the deep end of the pool of that situation and started figuring it all out. I do believe that shadowing on television shows is a wholly boring but informative experience.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Right. And so from all the things that I learned from that, I felt confident jumping in and knowing how to begin. And then once I was in it, if there were things that came up, um, because I was prepared enough to know that crazy shit will happen,
Mm-hmm.
um, um, and that you can't plan for it, then you just kind of dealt with it as it came.
Yeah.
I, I feel like me and the crew had a very got into a rhythm and started understanding each other and understanding what our quirks were.
Mm-hmm.
So it helped us to, as we moved on. And I also think that spreading it out over various weekends helped us to kind of do mini postmortems so that we could be
Adjust.
better the next weekend.
Yeah, that's great. So you had mentioned that you would do things differently next time, but tell us about once you have your show in the can, I guess, post.
Everything that happens after you shoot your show.
Yeah.
Is super. Everything that happens before you shoot your show and everything that happens after you shoot your show is super important.
Yeah.
My number one piece of advice to any person who is making a web series is be an artist first. So make sure you're telling a story. Don't make sure that you're doing it to showcase yourself. To make sure that you're telling a story. And I guarantee you it needs a rewrite. I guarantee you. If even after you've done the rewrite, I guarantee you it needs another one.
Yeah.
Guarantee.
The hardest part.
Yeah.
That is the hardest part. So the hardest part is just in the conception of making it and making sure that your scripts are as tight as possible, because I also see a lot of web series that go on way too long, and those things, and then you don't want to kill your baby, so then you shoot all of that, and you don't want to, and that destroys you in shooting, right? You make sure your scripts are as tight as possible, then give yourself the extra time to shoot it. Then in post, really, really make sure, and honestly, so a big regret was the artistic experiment that I did, which I only did one rewrite. I wish I had rewrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I wish it had gone through several more drafts, but this show was just my id.
Yeah.
And I also wish that I had spent more time in post. We spent a long time in post. I think that we were in post for like 4 or 5 months. And that was because I wanted to make sure that the color grading was correct, and I wanted to make sure that the sound was good, because bad sound will show bad movie making in a millisecond. Editing, I wanted to make sure that the edits were as tight as possible. I think we spent way more time in post because I didn't do rewrites on the script. So a lot of the editing was about cutting it down and making it as tight as possible to tell the story. And then I really, really, really wish that on day one of making Keith Broke His Leg, I had a distribution plan, because it was so much of my trying to get Keith Broke His Leg out into the world took years, because I did not have a distribution plan at the very beginning. I did not think about how the world was going to be able to see it. Mm-hmm. And so much of my time working on Keith Broke His Leg was just years of promoting it. And if I had and I was scrambling in those years. Yeah. And if I had a plan going forward, it would have made the journey much easier and faster. Sure. And would have made sure that people got to see it much sooner.
Can you
what
just
would you have done? What would you have
Right.
done differently? I mean, as far as a plan.
Um, I would have leveraged, I would have put a list together with somebody. In post, I found a producer who helped me kind of create a marketing and distribution plan, and marketing and advertisement plan, along with distribution. And we sat down and we went through all the ways that we can market the show, posters, postcards, knocking on doors, having, I think UCB hosted the first, a screening of the first few episodes. And then there was a Q&A with my celebrity friends, about it afterwards, that we were trying to get the word out. But because we scrambled for that, we weren't able to get the word out as wide as we wanted to. I wish that I wasn't thinking on the fly about all the people in the press that I knew that I could go and ask for, because a lot of them came back to me and said, I wish I had more lead time to talk to you about it, because I can't do it now. I wish that I had partnered. I partnered with Vimeo on Keith Broke His Leg at one point. So Vimeo came and interviewed me, and I went to the Vimeo offices and interviewed, and they created a marketing plan for how to get the word out for them on their platform and things like that. And that all happened at the last minute. And so we weren't able to get the word out as much as we could because we didn't have, because we were scrambling. And so things like that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so it just sounds like, in a nutshell, have a plan when you go into the project of where it's going to end up. And I think that a lot of times you would talk about, in the creation of a thing, you think about what you want the end result to be. But again, this is a huge process with a lot of moving parts, a lot of different people, and your intention going in to make this artistic, creative expression doesn't, it's hard to think about marketing at the same time as art sometimes. So,
yeah, it's hard. It's really hard.
So I guess that kind of brings us full circle a little bit, which is, do you feel like you met that original goal and that intention of making this artistic expression? What did you gain, do you think, from this process? What would you do differently?
I gained my artistic life. I learned who I was as an artist working on it. I learned how to be a better director. I learned how to be a better communicator in directing. I learned how to be a better writer. I learned that everything I do going forward has to come from me, deep into my soul, and not to be in service of someone else, but to be in service of that little voice inside of me that will help someone else. And all of that came from Keith Broke His Leg. Keith Broke His Leg also helped me get my first episode of television to direct. And frankly, when I did that first episode of television, I ignored the advice that, or I ignored the lesson that I learned on Keith Broke His Leg, and it didn't go as well for me. And so thankfully, by the second time I did my episode of television, I need to go back to listening to this little voice inside of me and helping that in the process, rather than trying to do what other people want me to do.
That's great. So would you do it again?
No. It was hard. It was hard, man. It was hard. And it was years of work. Years of work.
Yeah. Can you tell us?
I actually went back and watched Keith Broke His Leg. And I went, and there are some things I would definitely do differently artistically, obviously, because I've grown as an artist since then. But I went back and I went, this is a weird, quirky, wonderful little show.
Yeah.
It's so I watched it yesterday, and that's what I thought. So, so that's coming through. It's coming through.
There's some. It's odd, and it's a little off in a way that I very much am proud of.
Perhaps that's you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So Keith, we have a couple minutes left. I'd love to hear, what are you working on now that you would love to tell people about?
I'm now directing for television full time. So there's some projects that I, knock on wood, I'm up for, that I'm going to go and do. Can't talk about those, I guess.
Sure.
There's an episode of Dickinson that I directed that is one of the most creative experiences of my life, working in television. It's a music themed episode, and it's coming on Apple TV Plus. I think it's dropping mid-November, late November, sometime like that. I
And
did
who wrote
episode
that
5.
episode?
What's that?
Who wrote that episode?
Elena Smith, who is a
Okay.
genius.
Did
Elena
you ever
Smith
have a chance to meet Ken Greller?
I have not.
He was
No.
one of the writers on Dickinson. I don't know if he's still with them.
Oh yeah. I don't know. Elena created the show,
Yeah.
and asked me to come in and direct one of the episodes, and she's my writing hero. I mean, she's an incredible person and an incredible writer. So
Yeah. Yeah.
and then I directed an episode of a show coming up called Single Drunk Female, on Freeform, that I'm very proud of. And then I just directed a movie, a Christmas movie for Hallmark called A Holiday in Harlem,
Wow.
that I just literally came back from last week, and we just picture locked last night. So
Oh, great. Congrats.
Congratulations. That's great.
and it's fun. It's a fun little, lovely, heartwarming story.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Well, Keith, I think that's just about everything that I wanted to talk about. Jason, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
No, I think you've covered things and more. It's always interesting to hear people's impetus for writing things and sharing their work. And certainly Keith Broke His Leg is unique in its conception, and I'm so glad it did so well and continues to get eyes on it.
I'm very proud of it. I'm even in the artsy thought. I think the show is thoughtful, and I think that's what I like to bring into it. So I'm very proud of it. Thank you.
Well, Keith, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. It was really great.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Keith.
Bye.
Take
Bye
care. That conversation had so much great advice for people who want to make their show.
Be an artist first.
Make sure you have a plan for your show before you shoot it. Prep is king.
Great stuff. And you can find Keith and learn more about his latest projects at his website, powelltothepeople.net, and on social media. We'll have links for you in our notes.
And you can find out more about us, Make Your Show, and what we do at our website, which is makeyourshow.tv. And we'll have links to a lot of what we talked about here today on our site.
Thanks so much for joining us, and keep a lookout for more episodes just like this one.